Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow Public Speaking Presentations, Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow, and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and/or go to the Facebook Live, the LinkedIn Live video feed, the link to which I'll now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. This show thrives on participant contributions, and all participants are encouraged to actively participate in this webinar by asking questions and making comments. To do so, please either write in the chat room, raise your hand, or turn on your microphone to say hi, and I'll be delighted to include your perspective in the conversation. Tonight, our featured guests are the artistic leadership team of Tempesta di Mare, Philadelphia Baroque Orchestra. Gwen Roberts, a recorder player, Baroque flutist, and co-director and co-founder, and Richard Stone, a lutenist and co-director and co-founder. We are also pleased to be joined by Dr. Lino Rivera, professor of music at St. Mary's College of California. Fantastic. Gwen, welcome.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I had to find the unmute button. Thanks, Simeon. Glad to be here. Good to see
Gwen,
everybody.
can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to become a professional musician?
Well, I was supposed to be a doctor, so, of course. But I grew up singing Renaissance music and playing recorder as well as flute and piano. My mom was in a Renaissance choir at Bryn Mawr College, where I eventually went as well. And right as I was about to enter as a pre-med, I met soprano Julianne Baird, who was one of my favorite singers at the time. She was engaged to a guy I was doing some internship with at a local public radio station. And I said to myself, wow, you can do this for a living? And it was the pre-med kind of went away at that point. And I eventually went to conservatory after finishing an undergraduate general music degree at Bryn Mawr. I went to conservatory in Holland and came back, and rest is history.
Did I hear you right? Did you say you grew up singing Renaissance music?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that common? Is that common in that area of Pennsylvania?
I don't. My mother was a graduate student at Bryn Mawr College, and there was a Renaissance choir. And so she was in that starting when I was about 8, and I loved it. So I joined when I was 12 and grew up singing in a choir.
Fantastic.
Too. Mm-hmm. Renaissance ensemble.
Yeah, she had a little Renaissance trio with her friends as well.
So Richard, welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you became a professional musician? Did you grow up singing in Renaissance choirs?
No, I did not grow up. I wanted to be an artist, and when I was in high school, I focused everything I was doing in on the visual arts, sculpture and painting and so forth. But at the same time, I was playing classical guitar and violin. And my ensemble participation was the sitting at the back of the local civic orchestra, the back of the second violins, and having the time of my life. But somewhere along the line, I just sort of got the call from music, and I answered the call. I just kind of feel like music chose me. I didn't choose it.
So you were doing first visual arts, you were kind of in that creative atmosphere, and then
Yes.
you went into music, which is an extremely hard field to get into in any case, but you felt drawn to it. You felt like it chose you?
Yes, yes. I went when I finished high school. I entered the conservatory program at the State University of New York at Purchase College, and then after that, I got a Fulbright and went to London and studied at the Guildhall School. And when I started, it was classical guitar in the at SUNY. But then when I went on to graduate school, it was on playing the lute. I studied with Nigel North over there.
Fantastic. And so you said also you were playing second violin. Were you always a guitarist first?
Yeah,
First,
I started with guitar, and then I picked up the violin when I was like, I don't know, 13 or something, 13 or 14. And then when I was, good enough to could play in tune, I joined the local civic orchestra, and I was the newest arrival, so I got the pleasure of sitting at the way back where nobody could see what I was doing.
and Richard, about the going from guitar then when you were at Purchase to lute there at Guildhall School, tell us, how did you make that move?
When I was at conservatory, what I was playing more than anything else was transcriptions of lute music on the guitar. So my teacher, my guitar teacher, who was a big believer in playing on the instrument for which the music was written, said, well, why don't you just pick up the lute and give that a go? And I found a lute teacher, and I had basically drank the Kool-Aid at that moment. I was completely hooked. I had to finish my guitar degree, so I did that. But after that, I have not opened my classical guitar case since graduating from my undergraduate.
Didn't you tell me you clipped off your fingernails backstage at the end of your recital?
I did,
Yeah.
yes. Because you play the lute barefingered.
And you tell us, yeah, that was my next question, Richard, before we watch our next video. Tell us, what's the main difference? Because I understand in J.S. Bach's time and before that the lute was really the most popular instrument. It was just like people buying a guitar today. What made you fall in love with it? Because nobody plays the lute that I know besides you today.
You have to get around more. You'll meet lots of lute players. It was. I don't really know. I'm at a loss for words. I love the feel of it. I love the sound of it. It was, yeah. I guess I was just my frame of mind was in the right place to be receptive to that sort of thing, and there was no turning back, as I said.
Wow. Okay, let's hear. This is a performance of Foch Concerto in G by Tempesta di Mare. Fantastic. So, Gwen, you are the clearly the ensemble person here. Tell us a little bit about founding of Tempesta di Mare. Why did it come about naturally? You and Richard are co-founders, but tell us a little bit about why you decided to found this Philadelphia Baroque Orchestra. Philadelphia already has the renowned Philadelphia Orchestra and all that. Why found this ensemble?
Well, I got an email from a guy who was starting a recording company focused on early repertoire and looking for interesting repertoire to record. And I've always had a thing, as has Richard, for doing things that are not the same pieces that everybody does. So we responded to that by recording the Veracini recorder sonatas, first half of them, with some of my friends. And when it was in the can, the guy called and said, so what's the name of the group? And because he said, well, because this has legs. I thought it was just my recording. No. So we named the group. Richard drank a lot of coffee and came up with the name, which is after a Vivaldi concerto. And we did several projects, including Richard's baby, which was the reconstructions of the Weiss Lute Concerti. And in the course of doing that, also unknown repertoire. We did the premiere of those pieces at the Prague Spring Festival in 2000. In the course of doing that, we put together an orchestra for Concerto Grosso, and we thought, this is a heck of a lot of fun. Let's really do this, right? And so at that point, instead of simply, being a chamber group that toured on other people's concert series, we realized that we needed to do things like incorporate and form a board of directors and be able to fundraise and establish a series here. So yes, Philadelphia definitely has the Philadelphia Orchestra, and it's awesome. But we do different repertoire, and we do it differently.
Yeah, and we're the second in population to New York on the
East Coast.
On the East Coast, so we're definitely not a one-horse town.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, there's a chamber orchestra here.
Yeah.
There are numerous Baroque ensembles and Renaissance ensembles, including the Renaissance band Piffero.
Right, which I was a member of for 9 years. So Philadelphia's got some stuff going on. Yeah.
And Richard, and so Gwen was talking about that it was the repertoire first. The repertoire came, and then the orchestra followed. So tell us a little bit about what does that mean, Baroque repertoire? We saw you there with your lute, or I guess it's called the theorbo, or something strange like that. There in the middle of the group. What makes it different than a symphony orchestra?
For one, to answer the first question, Baroque music refers to music written between approximately 1600 and 1750, which was the era when, to be a little bit technical, the era of basso continuo, basically. And what I was doing with the guitar and the lute in both situations was reading basically from a cello part, but improvising harmonies on top of it. And the other question was, remind me of the other question.
The question was, so about tell us about how is it different from a symphony orchestra?
Oh.
We saw it looks a lot different. You've got it seems like a harpsichord in the middle and all that. So what is, how do you know that you're supposed to be doing that? Is that written in the score, or what makes a Baroque orchestra different than a symphony orchestra?
Right. So this is about the right tools for the job kind of thing. So when you play Baroque music on the instruments that the composers had around them and what they had in their heads, it comes out very differently than if you play it on an instrument that's set up for playing Rachmaninoff or Schoenberg. Mm-hmm. There's just a different speech to the instruments. In fact, all of the Baroque instruments are more speech-like than their modern counterparts, which are more, they sing more. Baroque instruments speak more. So the violins are set up differently. The flutes are made of wood, and they have minimal amount of keys. Flutes have one keys. Oboes have two? One key. Yeah. There's the harpsichord. There's the lutes. All the instruments are replicas of stuff that was played in the 17th and 18th centuries.
Yeah, and the music is built on top of basso continuo. So that's what the harpsichord and the lute and the cellos and the basses are playing, sort of in the heart of the ensemble, and everything else sits on top of that, rather than it being kind of top down with a conductor waving a stick. We are sort of bottom up, sitting on top of the structure created by the continuo, and essentially conversing on top of it.
Wow. And so just a last question before we get to hear some more music. So how do you, Gwen, decide where people sit? How do you know which instruments to bring along? We saw that Richard was playing two different guitar instruments there. How do you know? Is that just written in the score, or how do you, if you're making a Baroque ensemble, are they equal? Is one equal to another? Like a symphony orchestra generally has a certain number of violins and all that. How do you decide?
Well, some of it, you're absolutely right, is written into the score. So, for instance, that Foch concerto was specified as for two flutes, two oboes, bassoon, strings, and continuo, right?
Yeah, it's that same with the Vivaldi.
And the Vivaldi before, but that was two recorders, right? The choice of continuo instruments is made based on what time and place the music comes from, right? Because different continuo instruments are more appropriate to different styles of music. And sometimes, or often, we arrange music, or Richard orchestrates music to match the ensemble that we have, which is also a historically based thing to do. So we use the instruments that we've hired for the pieces that have specified orchestration, and then just adapt other pieces that are less specific to match what we've got available. And in terms of how many, that's based on balance primarily, right? So if you're only going to have one flute per flute part, you can't really have 27 violins, or nobody's going to hear it. So we balance the orchestra so that we can all hear each other and we can be heard by the audience.
Yeah, there was this one time where we were recording Telemann and performing Telemann concerto, a violin concerto, and it has two flute parts, but the strings were completely covering it, so we doubled. We had two first flutes and two second flutes, and then all of a sudden the piece worked.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Let's have a listen to this next piece. This is Johann Gottlieb Yanich, Darmstadt Symphony in G. Fantastic. So, Gwen, tell us a little bit about now. Take us into Tempesta di Mare, into a rehearsal. Tell us what is it like? You don't have a conductor, I see. It seems like everybody is kind of participating in equal measure. Tell us about that. How does that function?
Well, that's kind of the heart of what makes the ensemble work. And we it's an ensemble that is composed entirely of people who are themselves experts in this. So everybody has what could be a wonderful opinion about how the music is going to go, but the job of a rehearsal week is to get us all marching in the same direction, agreeing on one interpretation, so that we don't wind up with something that has all of the opinions sort of filed out of it. So that starts with actually Richard and me. Before we get together at all, we spend time marking expression into the music. We decide the basic shapes that we want to have happen, the dynamics, the pauses, the articulations, the moods of a piece. And we'll write sometimes rather surprising things into the music, like, small insects scurrying around or something. Images that help us to evoke what it is that we're looking for in a piece.
No insects in that movement. We just
no, there were no insects
no
in
bugs.
that one.
There were no bugs.
but agreeing on an affect, and then we send the music off to Emlyn Nye, our concertmaster, and he bows the string parts and maybe adds some things to our expression, so that we have working parts before we get together that already have opinion in them. And then we get together for what we call Director's Day, after distributing the music around. And Director's Day is Richard and me and Emlyn, concertmaster, and Lisa Terry, our principal cello. And we spend a day playing through the music together and amplifying, making sure that what we wrote into the music works, but also amplifying it and adding to that. So by the end of Director's Day, the four of us who are really at the very core of the ensemble are playing with one opinion. And then we add principals, the principals of the section. We add the principal second violin, the principal viola, the harpsichord. Anybody who's a soloist or who has an important part. And we do the same thing for another day. And so now we've come from only the core has the way it's going to go. And now we've added the principals around the room. And again, we amplify the interpretation amongst us. So by the time the whole ensemble arrives for our first tutti day of rehearsals, we have a plan and we are already playing it. So during that first tutti day, we, the principals who've been together, may very well play a movement for the rest of the group before everybody dives in order to make sure we are again amplifying the musical point of view. And everybody can contribute, and everybody does contribute, but we don't fundamentally change course after we're underway. We just make the interpretation more distilled. And the other thing that is, I think, key to all of this is that early on we realized a couple things about rehearsing. Number one, that time is the most valuable thing we have. And so I spend a lot of time prior to rehearsal week deciding how much time we need for each thing, so that we know as we're going through that we're going to get to the end without running out of time. And we've also then realized that playing something again often solves a lot of the nitpicky problems. So we don't waste time early on in a process on too many details. We work on unifying the ensemble in the important things, and then the details tend to follow in that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we go through the repertoire 3 times before we get to the first performance.
Okay. So we have 2 comments from Ali Safi. So beautiful. Thank you for serving music. Thank you very much for coming today, Ali Safi. Just to be clear then, so you talk about yourselves as a self-directed theater company. So the main idea, though, is that you and Richard are there kind of making these overarching decisions about, when what's happening there. And then little by little, that kind of evolves but that you and Richard are really setting the tone. Tell us about how that's different from the symphony orchestra and how the repertoire kind of affects that, because I imagine that a lot of the music you're playing, the music is not known, whereas with the symphony orchestra they really concentrate on music that's known, that already has a lot of traditions. So if you would write, in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony at the beginning, bugs scurrying, then people would probably laugh at you. So tell us about that.
Do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
You decide.
Okay.
And we can both talk the way we always do.
Yeah, we always talk together. So it's you're right. The repertoire is not necessarily known, although sometimes we play things that are known repertoire, but mostly not. The difference between the question was the difference between us and the way a symphony orchestra works. A symphony orchestra tends to have a music director who is actually a person waving a stick, almost always a guy waving a stick, right? And so the ensemble takes direction from a single point, and they're mostly focused on somebody who is not playing an instrument, but rather waving a stick and physically instructing them what to do. Yes, there's communication within the sections, but it's much more sort of one-point directorship.
Yeah, and it didn't exist in the Baroque era.
Did not exist in the Baroque era. What we're doing is actually what they did. We don't have a conductor. We don't need a conductor. Many Baroque ensembles do have a conductor, but my experience playing in our ensemble versus an ensemble that has a conductor is that because we're all actively participating in creating and refining the interpretation, we are doing it together rather than receiving it from somebody else.
Yeah, we work, the way we like to describe it is that we work in concentric circles. The process Gwen was describing was not a hierarchical top-down thing. It's an inside-outwards thing. So we teach our thing we share or teach our thing with our principals, our directors, and then that goes outwards to the principals, and that goes outwards to the pianists and the rest of the ensemble, and it creates a huge sense of investment and ownership in the performance, whereas in a more hierarchical thing, you don't need to be emotionally invested in the performance if all you need to do is do what the conductor says. And you get gorgeous performances that way too. But it's just a different approach.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And some of that's made possible by the fact that we don't have 100 people on the stage, right? It's more. It's a smaller group of people, so the conversation and the contact across the stage is that we need is possible.
I think the biggest group we've ever had on stage is like 32 people, and for us that felt huge, and we didn't even know if we could do it. But it worked.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's have a listen now to, this is Jean-Ferry Rebel. This is Characters of the Dance.
Before you go into this, the thing to watch out for in this piece is this is a bunch of snippets of little tiny beginnings of dance movements, and they go one into the next. And the challenge in doing this as an ensemble is getting those transitions together, getting everybody to move from something that's in 2 into something in 3 and back, and have different characters.
And the cues come from all over the orchestra.
if you watch the ensemble, it's easy to see Emily concert master cueing things. But it's not only Emlyn, it's all over the band.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's have a listen right now. Wow, fantastic. So please let's Richard, now tell us a little bit about this idea of storytelling in music. And I guess that's where we got and the Professor Lino Rivera writes, absolutely engaging, bravi, in the chat room. So tell us, Richard, about this idea of the storytelling. And I guess we got into that a little bit about the idea of you writing, okay, insects scurrying around or something. But tell us about, what does that mean in music then? And tell us about this idea also of the Baroque music as representing something, and that idea.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to be just a teeny tiny bit of a pedant here and go back to the beginning of the Baroque era, where the complaint by the composers circa 1600 was that the music was pretty, but somehow the melodies and the words weren't helping each other. And so around circa 1600, Caccini published this book called Le Nuove Musiche, the new way of writing music. And these were songs where the shapes of the melodies were directly tied in to the emotion that the words were supposed to be conveying. And that expanded to the idea that basically music is not just a mathematical art, but it's also a rhetorical craft. And that eventually expanded itself into instrumental music, to wordless music, that you could using the basic grammar of music, you could imbue the performance, granted the composition will allow it, with rhetorical features. So for instance, if a theme repeats, and you heard this in the Vivaldi, we had the bum, bum, bum continually going on, but it was never the same bum, bum, bum. They always had a direction. It had one of the things of the tropes of rhetoric is repetition, right? That if you say something and you say it again and again, each time I repeat the word again, it takes on a different flavor. Either it could be one of emphasis, it could be one of de-emphasizing, but it's directional. Another thing that we use to advantage is this idea of accumulation, that you have a bunch of things that are piled on top of each other, and that if you talk about like a laundry list, but one that has emotional import. So you have your pillowcases, and you have your chair covers, and you have your linens, your bath linens, and you have your underwear. And as you layer these things on top of each other, it starts to take on weight. And so that's another thing that we try to express. And another thing that was in a bunch of the pieces that we played was this idea of silence. That if you have a silence and you delay it a little bit more, it can be quite strong also. Rhetorically, it can emphasize the thing that's going to follow. My favorite example of this is actually the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is, how can something sweet be so nasty? And that pause is actually really important for getting the word to speak. If you just said, how can something so sweet be so nasty? It's an entirely different reading of the thing.
So
yes,
we have, excuse me, Gwen, we have Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California has a comment. Hi, Lino.
Yes. Hello, Richard and Gwen. I just want to support what Richard just said regarding the engaging of the music starting from the Baroque era. If we listen to Renaissance music, and this is what I teach my students, Palestrina, Thomas Louis Victoria, they massage the emotion. They want you to get excited. It massages and pacifies all of those emotions. Starting from the Baroque era, there is that engagement. And as Caccini said, Richard was saying, we have to engage you right here. And I think that is where we musicians picked up the word movement. First movement, second movement. For a movement of a Baroque composition, there is one affection or one emotion. And Baroque composition wants to move you, not to massage your emotions. I just want to support that, with the principle.
Yeah, exactly.
Well put, right?
Yeah, exactly. I often say that one of the things that draws me to Baroque music is it's the first music that intended to excite and inflame and stoke the emotions of the audience, of the people listening to it. It's for the listener in that way.
Fantastic. Let's have a listen now to that storytelling in action. This is Telamon, Sancho Panza, tossed in a blanket. Here we are. Richard, so tell us a little bit about what we're hearing there. What story is going on?
Right. So this is an excerpt from the story from the Don Quixote books, where Quixote and Sancho Panza are staying at an inn, and I don't remember exactly what brought it on, but there's some ruffians at the inn who decide to have fun on at Sancho Panza's expense, and they toss him up and down in a blanket as a way of mocking him. And that was the title of this thing, and that we just let our imaginations go with it. And we saw in this three musical figures, or motifs, if you want to be Wagnerian about it, three motifs that, to our imaginations, played into this story, that supported the story. One of them was the idea of mocking. Da, 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 as in na 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 na, and in fact it's very similar to that. That's one thing. And so when we played that, we gave it a little snarl, a little sneer to it, in terms of the way the violins and flutes articulated that, a little bit of extra pressure on it. The other one, the second one, was the tossing in the air. And what we did is we decided that briam was the toss up and bum was the landing. But of course, you don't necessarily get, depending on how strongly you get tossed up, you don't land at the same time each time. It depends on how high you get tossed. So we played with that and delayed some of the landings so that it seems like he got tossed higher, at least, for our imaginations. Mm-hmm. And finally, there was the idea of the ruffians laughing at him. And that comes mostly in the bass instruments with a bump, 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 as in like a belly laugh. So yeah, that's how we saw that.
And this is one of Telemon's depictive suites. So he's very intentionally giving us the material to do this, but it's on us to figure out how to deliver.
Yeah, and so we actually mark this into the score. There's the taunt, there's the toss, and there's the belly laugh. Mm-hmm. Not in the score, in the part book. So everybody knows this is what we're trying to evoke. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so Richard, going back to your point about writing, you and Gwen writing in the score before anybody gets the score, these kind of emotions or these ideas about insects or bugs running around. So in this case, Telamon actually put that in before. So you don't have to write that in.
Well, no, he wrote it in the notes. He wrote the notes that give us what it is and the title of the movement. And it's up to us to recognize the raw materials that we can use in these ways to tell the story. And then we wrote it in the score. What were we doing?
We marked it in.
And so Gwen, have you ever had then some of the musicians say, no, that's clearly not the case. He's those people aren't laughing; they're crying, or what happens when you run into dissent?
Well, sometimes it's illuminating. But as I think I said at the beginning, I think we are a room full of experts, and I think we hire people, we work with people who all respect each other, and we all understand that there is more than one way of doing any of these things that can be equally valid, but we're choosing this one. And we usually don't have a dissent problem. We occasionally have something that doesn't work, in which case we'll fix it and change it. But it's more a situation of again, choosing one interpretation without saying that it's the only one.
Fantastic. Let's have a listen to the end of the Telemon piece. Fantastic. So moving on to our next presentation, I want to talk to you about, Richard, about this trip you made to what is now called Czechia. Tell us about this trip to Kroměříž, to the Archbishop's Palace, I believe it's called, and you were looking for new music. And this goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning about Tempesta di Mare being a place to present new repertoire. So not the Beethoven symphonies, but music that nobody knows, and really unearth these new Baroque musics.
Yeah, stuff that's worth hearing that you're missing out if you haven't heard it yet, even if you only hear it once. Yeah, there's this archive in this city called Kroměříž in the Moravian area of the Czech Republic, or Czechia, and the music that the Archbishop collected was the collection came up after the 30 Years' War. It was his idea to use the arts as part of how you rebuild the society after the ravages of the 30 Years' War. It began as an exploration for music with brass choirs, brass choirs and voices that we could do, and that was spinning off from a project that was down the road in Vienna for an 18th century composer. But what we found there was just an absolutely stunning trove of music that has not been published, and I took a lot of scans of the music while I was there, as much as I could do in 5 days, and I actually got myself to wake up early so I could be there when I'm not a morning person by any stretch of the imagination.
That's huge.
Yeah, and just when I got back to Philly, I started. They're all part books, so I assembled them into scores, and we programmed a bunch of it. And there was one composer in particular, Jacob Rittler, whose music is only there at this collection, and it's absolutely stunning music. Absolutely stunning. I think, in fact, one of the excerpts you'll play is one of his unpublished pieces. Some of his music is published. There's a famous, in our tiny circle, Chaconne for 2 trumpets and strings, that it is published, but most of his music isn't, and particularly his vocal music. We've done one of his vocal pieces that's still at Chailey, but that was a pandemic project. But yeah, but he's not the only one there. There's Bieber was there, Schmelzer was there. There is an absolute motherlode of anonymous music that's also of the same high quality, and the whole collection was curated by the court trumpeter Pavel Vavinovsky, who most modern trumpeters at least know of by name because he wrote a lot of trumpet music.
And Gwen, may I ask, so why is it that Richard can go there for 5 days to this extraordinary palace and find all this music that that's never been published, that nobody knows about? Why doesn't the Philadelphia Orchestra go there and present this new music? Why is there a treasure trove of music there, and that it's waiting for Tempesta di Mare to discover?
Well, for one thing, the Philadelphia Orchestra is the wrong size and kind of ensemble to play it, right? It's mostly chamber music of various sizes, and it wouldn't work if you have a amazing large string section and multiple basses and cellos, and
It needs more flexibility.
It needs
than
more
that.
flexibility, and it's not actually music that the Philadelphia Orchestra would find suited it particularly well. But the truth is that we've gotten into troves of undiscovered or unplayed music throughout our history. We began, as I said, with two projects, Veracini recorder sonatas and Weiss lute concertos, neither of which was music on the beaten path, even within our circles. And starting from the very beginning, we went looking for really good music that isn't already getting played, of the repertoire that we want. We've got a very long history of playing music that was performed in the 18th century by the Dresden Hofkapelle, which was the best Baroque orchestra in the Baroque time.
During the 18th century.
Yeah, during the 18th century, the Army of Generals Baroque Orchestra. And so we have a long history with them, including the Fasch that we saw earlier on in this webinar. We actually were playing in Dresden. We took an entire program of music that we had revived, that we had premiered in modern times from that collection, and went and performed it in Dresden, which was a total kick. But we've done a lot of this sort of thing. We've dived into individual composers at some length in order to get inside their heads. So we're not playing them generically. For instance, Yanich, whom you heard there, was a composer that we've spent a good deal of time inside his head, which lets us play it non-generically. Fasch, we've done a lot of Fasch premieres. We're about to do our fourth recording of modern premieres of Fasch orchestral repertoire.
Can I just jump in to say, by non-generically, we're looking for something that's specific to their discovering what their musical language and identity is, and working from there rather than
applying a generic
rule of thumb.
Right.
Yeah.
We've also gotten into some stories that are not just about the composers, right? So there's a really interesting tastemaker in Berlin in the 18th and early 19th centuries named Sarah Itzig Levy, who, along with her sisters, was responsible for the Bach revival. We think of Felix Mendelssohn as having created the Bach revival in the 19th century. But if it hadn't been for his great aunt, Sarah Itzig Levy, and his grandmother, he would not have had the score to the St. Matthew Passion to premiere, and he wouldn't have liked necessarily Bach's music, because it was Sarah Levy who had a music salon and was a harpsichordist herself, and was performing Bach with her friends and in public all the way into the 19th century. So she was a tastemaker who kept that music language alive and passed it on to the people who now get the credit for having a Bach revival in the 19th century. And why don't we think of her as being behind it? Probably because she's a Jewish woman, and also because, as somebody who was not herself the composer, she's not usually the kind of lens that we look through to tell the story of music history. We tend to talk about composers primarily, if not exclusively, when there are actually other people who are involved in the history of music.
Fantastic. So to conclude, Richard, tell us what's coming up that's exciting.
Well, we have our 2022-23, our 21st season. We just opened with some recitals. That was a very interesting program based on cello music that was heard in Philadelphia during the post-revolution Philadelphia, between 1770 and 1800. Sorry, like up to the 19th century, which was very, very interesting. We have a program coming up, Expats and Immigrants, is what happens when a composer moves abroad. Do they retain their identity from home and be an expat, or do they assimilate as immigrants?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we've got in the spring season, we're doing some more Foch premieres, which we will take to the Foch Festival at the end of our season to perform and record there.
And we're getting the Foch
And
prize.
we're the first, we're the US first US ensemble to get any of the European composer name prizes. So we're receiving the Foch prize of the city of Zerbst, which is very exciting. And then we have another program which is centered on the female musicians in Venice in the 17th and 18th century who were in the ospedali, these charitable institutions that took in foundlings, orphans, people who had chronic diseases, and trained the girls to be musicians of very high caliber. We hear about this through the lens of Vivaldi most often, but in fact, there were multiple of these institutions, all of which had important and interesting music programs featuring girls and women as the virtuoso and celebrity performers.
Fantastic. Wow. Well, let's see how we can stay in touch with Tempesta di Mare. So here is the website, tempestadimare.org. And Gwen and Richard, we can reach out to you just by going under there to contact us. Is that right? And people can ask you questions or ask you
Yes,
about
absolutely.
the upcoming season?
Sure. Yep.
Fantastic. So that's info@tempestadimare.org. So let's hear one quick note of music from the Ritter. This is what Richard found there in Chromages. Fantastic. Lovely. So, wow. Thank you so much to Gwen Roberts and to Richard Stone.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
so much for
Simeon.
having us.
It's been a real pleasure.
So let's see what's coming up next week. It is The Infinite City, Utopian Dreams on the Streets of London. Are cities filthy, dangerous places, the cesspools of immorality, where the rich trample on the dreams of the poor, where the poor steal whatever they can from the rich, and animals and nature are wantonly desecrated? Or are cities the haloed ground on which the divine promise of humanity slowly reveals itself, where communities based on ties of shared spirit, not of shared blood, work hand in hand to guarantee that the life of every citizen is lived to the fullest, to serve as proof that humans were wisely charged with inheriting the earth? Author and economist Niall Kishtani takes us on a wild ride through the utopian dreams and nightmares of the most influential thinkers to call London home. And keep in mind that, quote, no man is an island. As Niall reminds us in The Infinite City, his forthcoming powerhouse publication, quote, today we live in anti-utopian times, but utopian dreaming is essential to a vibrant society that is truly conscious of its own desires. Without it, we fall back on unexamined utopias, often those dictated by the powerful, end quote. Come welcome Niall to our show, and let's become friends with the greatest citizens in modern history. As always, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. thetheinfinitecity.com. Once again, that's The Infinite City, Utopian Dreams on the Streets of London. That's next Wednesday. Once again, thank you so very much to Gwen Roberts and to Richard Stone. Thanks very much to Professor Lino Rivera. And thank you to Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet for their support of this show. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile. From New London, New Hampshire, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the Bay Area, California, goodbye. See you next Wednesday.
Thank you. Bye.